One important part to remember when you're building these islands, again to reinforce, is the fact that the grid, once you start working with the grid, you'll realize that all the grid has the wires running different directions, one side and the other. So for example, all the 7-foot wires are on one side, the 2-foot wires are on the other side. The important part of that is when you're building the racks, or you're building these islands, that you keep the grid facing the same direction. In this one that we're building now, I've got all the 7-foot grid facing left. Doesn't matter if you do left, right, north, south, whatever you want, just keep it consistent, because the grid will grow if you intersperse the direction of the grid. The grid will be a ½ inch, or the rack will be a ½ inch longer, and you'll goof up your system eventually. So keep all the wire running the same direction. So 7-foot on the one side, 7-foot facing the same direction on this next I3. The other thing to remember is when you have your top shelves on here, you'll see we've got the same grid. We've got 4-foot grid and 2-foot grid on this 2x4 rack. Make sure all your 2-foot wires are facing up. It forms a smoother base on the top, so when you're sliding boxes on and off in the future, they'll slide easier when they're sliding on the 2-foot wires. Okay, so here we have one complete island unit, a 4-foot section. If you're following along on your drawings, we have the I1. This is the 2x7 grid we saw before. We have the I2. This is the center section, or the components of the center section. 2x4 grid on the top, 2x4 spine connected at the top, and a 4x4 center section. And then we have another 2x7 here on the drawings. We call this middle one an I3 also. I3 and I1 are the same pieces technically. We just identify them differently on the drawings. This will be a common leg to the next I2 in the island. So we start with our starter piece. We do an I2, we do an I3, a 2x7, and we'll just keep repeating this I2, I3 along the islands. Check your drawings to see how many island sections you have on the overhead view, and that's how many you'll build. When putting the racks together, I prefer to build one 4-foot section at a time, and then build another complete 4-foot section, and then combine the two, because the grid is heavy and kind of awkward. I like to build the freestanding unit. So you can see we did our first unit, we did our second unit. Now I've attached these grids to the first unit, and we pull the second one into place, and we use our connectors now to connect the floating section to the following section. So we've taken our first section we built a second identical section, and now we've connected it with the freestanding grid. So back to the drawings again. You've got your I1, your I2, your I3, another I2, same as you have back here, another I3, I2, I3, and so on until you get to your last row. Refer back to your drawings to make sure you know how many island sections you're going with. The most important thing, again, that we've done in order to gain strength is we've offset this internal spine grid. In the first one, we've got 4x4 grid on the bottom, going all the way to the bottom of the 2x7, 2x4 up top, supporting the 2x4 top shelf. In the next unit, we've offset that. 4x4 on the bottom, we've switched to 4x4 on the top with the 2x4 on the bottom. And then we alternate again, 4x4 top, 4x4 bottom, and we're going to continue to alternate that as you build the sections of island again until you get to your last one. Very important part to keep the strength of these racks so we don't have the weak spot on the bottom. The last thing you want to do once you have an island put together, you want to go back through and check to make sure all the feet, all the grid legs we put on there, are touching the ground very tightly. Because the concrete floors in your retail stores have some wave to them, they're not perfectly level, you need to make sure and go back through and tighten all the grid leveler pads to the bottom. You can see in this one, because we have a high spot over here, this one is not touching. So you need to take a channel type pliers and screw the nylon foot all the way to the ground. Make sure it's touching. If you have to, put a couple of extra turns on it this way. Make sure, now you can see we've got good contact down here, and the whole rack is much more stable because we've got that firm contact.